All right, let's dive right in. Today we're tackling a book that feels just as urgent and electric now as it did 60 years ago. James Baldwin's incredible work, The Fire Next Time. So what we're really going to get into is the unbelievable staying power of this book. I mean, it came out in 1963, right in the thick of the civil rights movement. But it speaks to our world today with a force that is just staggering. And that really is the big question, isn't it? What is it about this book, these essays, that gives them such a long, potent life? How does it remain so essential for understanding race in America decade after decade?
Well, for starters, a huge part of the answer is just how influential it's been. Its ideas are a living, breathing part of our modern conversation. You can see its DNA all over Ta-Nehisi Coates' masterpiece Between the World and Me. And it literally gave Jessamine Ward the title for her powerful anthology, The Fire This Time.
And this is it, The Fire Next Time, by the one and only James Baldwin. You know, it's not a very long book. You could read it in an afternoon. But its weight, its sheer impact is just immense. And a lot of that comes down to its really unique structure.
So, to really get this book, you have to understand how it's built. It's not one long single essay. It's actually two very distinct pieces. You could call them letters. And each one has a totally different purpose and a different audience in mind. The way he puts it together is just fascinating. It kicks off with My Dungeon Shook, which is this incredibly intimate, personal letter to his 14-year-old nephew. And then it follows that with Down at the Cross, which is this big, sweeping analysis of America written for the entire nation. It's like he's operating on two different scales to deliver one single, powerful message. And you can see it plain as day right there in the table of contents, two essays forming one complete, powerful whole. So let's start with that first one. We start with My Dungeon Shook. Now, Baldwin wrote this on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. I mean, talk about timing, right? It's basically a message of love, of warning, and just profound wisdom being passed down to the next generation. And right out of the gate, in this very personal letter, Baldwin makes one of his most searing, gut-punching arguments. He's not just talking about obvious, ugly hatred. He's pointing to something way more subtle and maybe even more dangerous. See, for Baldwin, the fundamental crime here is willful ignorance. It's the refusal to see the damage being done. It's this so-called innocence, this comfortable blindness that actually allows the whole oppressive system to just keep on running. It's a devastating point. And then, after explaining all this crushing history, he delivers this absolutely radical challenge to his young nephew. He doesn't call for revenge or for hate. He calls for a difficult, world-changing kind of love, arguing it's the only real way forward. It's just incredible.
Okay, so let's shift gears to the second, much longer essay, Down at the Cross. Here, Baldwin zooms way out from the personal and starts to dissect the huge systemic forces in American life, and he focuses specifically on religion. He actually uses his own life story as the framework for this. He talks about his time as a young pastor in Harlem, and then about his eventual painful break from the church. He basically concluded that Christianity, as it was practiced in America, just couldn't contain the full truth of his experience as a black man. And this next part is just amazing. He takes us with him to a dinner he had with Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. And Baldwin really explores the appeal of the movement. He gets why creating a theology that centered blackness, that created a black God, was such a powerful counter-narrative to what he saw as the oppressive white God of mainstream Christianity.
But look, if we only talk about what Baldwin says, we're missing half the magic. The book's timeless power. The reason it gets under your skin is how he says it. His use of language, of unforgettable metaphors. It's just breathtaking.
For example, he uses this idea of the fixed star. It's such a brilliant way to explain the psychological shock that true racial equality represented for so much of white America at the time.
He says that for centuries, black people were this constant, this fixed point in the sky that white people used to navigate and define their own reality. So he asks, what happens when that star starts to move? Well, for them, the entire universe feels like it's shaking apart. What a powerful, perfect image.
And that brings us to another amazing metaphor, one that loops right back to his radical message of love. With this one, he completely flips the script on the accepted power dynamic.
He tells his nephew that white Americans are lost younger brothers, trapped in a history they refuse to understand. In this framing, it's actually they who need to be saved, to be guided to reality. It's just a stunning reframing of who holds the moral authority.
And all of this, the personal letter, the sweeping analysis, the poetic language, it all builds toward the book's final prophetic warning, which is hidden right there in plain sight in the title itself. So let's crack the code of the fire next time.
The title actually comes from an old spiritual, one that references the story of Noah's Ark. The key line is, God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time.
The logic of that spiritual is simple, and honestly it's terrifying. The first time God cleansed the world's great sin with water, with a flood, the song is a warning that the next time, for the next great sin, the punishment won't be water, it will be fire.
And Baldwin basically weaponizes this prophecy. He's making the case that racism is America's great unrepentant sin, and if the country doesn't choose the path of love and justice to confront its own history, then the consequence will be a consuming, destructive fire, a social and political inferno.
And that leaves us with this final, unavoidable question. The fire Baldwin warned of in 1963 has sparked and flared up again and again in the decades since. It forces us to ask, what does that prophecy mean for us, right now? And after all this time, are we finally ready to listen?